Welcome, everyone, today to our Clean Start Perspective. I'm Thomas Hall, Executive Director of Clean Start, and we're here today to talk about clean energy, the energy transition, and we're going to be focusing on entrepreneurship and generation from water today. So I hope you're as excited about that as I am. Clean Start Perspectives are supported by SMUD, our local utility here, who actually gets the majority of their energy from hydroelectric. Blue Tech Valley, they are a part of the CEC's innovation cluster down there in Fresno. We partner with them to support entrepreneurs in the greater Sacramento area and all the way north. We're also supported by the California Mobility Center and River City Bank, both of them helping clean energy projects and entrepreneurs for as long as they can. I also want to thank those of you out there who have donated and contributed to us. It goes a long way and it validates what we're doing. Now, with that, I would like to welcome our guest, Emily Morris, founder and CEO of Emrgy. I could try to give Emrgy an introduction, but I'm going to let her go ahead and do it and tell us about Emrgy and what it is and what they're hoping to do. You're muted.
Of course I am. It had to be, right? Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Morris, and I'm the founder and CEO of Emrgy. Thank you so much for having me here today, Thomas. It's a pleasure to be with you talking about Clean Start Perspectives and specifically what we're doing here at Emrgy. Emrgy is a company that views the energy transition in a way that can contribute when you're working locally with local power generation, when you're working with a reliable and controllable renewable resource, which is water, and when we can deliver power where and when it's needed most. And so at Emrgy, we are developing renewable energy projects that are centered on water infrastructure. Water infrastructure is a specific term for us, and it's essentially some water conduit that's used to move or treat or pump water for purposes of municipal or agricultural needs. And that's an important piece of what we're doing, because we're not often we say we're not your grandma's hydro. We're not building dams out in the mountains or in a way that would flood communities and building out, traditional hydroelectric. What Emrgy is doing is bringing water power into the 21st century, into the energy transition, putting it in places that can be really highly impacted by the power of water, and can ultimately lead to a cleaner future for me, for my family, and for all of yours as well.
That sounds great. So your guys' hydro that you're doing, you're putting it in canals around water infrastructure. And so what size are these, hydroelectric generators, and what do they usually power? What are you looking to be able to help people power?
Yeah, so if a picture is worth 1,000 words, I think I'll show a video so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about here. So what you see on the screen is Emrgy's core power generating platform. This is a modular water power turbine. This here is actually 2 turbines. You can see 2 generators side by side that feed into a common power system. This is a really cool project, and maybe I'll pause and tell you a bit about the specific project here at hand. During COVID, Emrgy received a phone call from a water district in New Zealand. We had not been pursuing projects in New Zealand. To date, we are focused on the US. New Zealand, of course, during COVID was not very open to Americans in general. And so a water district called us and they said, hell, we'd love to work with you and let us tell you about what we're doing. And so what we learned is that this canal that you see here in the picture, this takes water from a river in New Zealand, and it delivers water through the farmland to the dairies that are on both sides of the canal here, and ultimately it discharges into the ocean. This is very similar to how water is moving in California as well. Typically, water is diverted off of a river, taken into the cities and farms, and then ultimately discharged either back into the river or to the coast. And as that water is running through, there's deliveries out to the farms. In this case, the New Zealand government actually provides funding for conservation efforts. And so this water district found that they were losing 30% of the water they run through the channel into the ground through infiltration and seepage. And so they came in and put in a high-tech sort of HDPE, high-density polymer liner into the channel to conserve water in the channel. But what they found is that they were also conserving energy in the channel. And so the water started to run a lot faster through the channel than perhaps it did before. And they called us and said, look, we either need to dissipate that energy and put rocks or walls into the channel, or we need to harvest that energy. And this tech is one that can take energy that's already in canals, whether they've increase the energy like this particular district, or whether the energy just exists, because these channels are running downhill by gravity, and that gravity ultimately has energy in it. And so what we do is we install these systems into the channel. We don't do any construction whatsoever. We don't modify the channel. We don't divert the water. We don't impound or build a dam. We simply place these turbines into the channel. And then as the water runs through the turbines, it generates electricity. Coming to your question, Thomas, about size, each one of these turbines is rated between 5 kilowatts and 25 kilowatts, depending on the depth of the water and the speed of the water. You can compare that often to a rooftop. Each one of these drive lines is similar to a rooftop with solar. The difference is that this water runs 24 hours a day, sometimes 9 months out of the year, sometimes every day of the year, just depending on what the purpose of the water is. And so while the peak power is the same as a rooftop, you can imagine that over time, the actual energy amasses at a much higher rate because you're generating power 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so in this case, we actually just shipped them kits. This is a very simple system to kit up and ship. We shipped it overseas to them. They were able to assemble it. They actually, over here on the shoreline, this little white box, hopefully you can see my cursor. This little white box is the same power electronics that would go on the side of your house if you have solar on your roof. And so they were able to buy that locally from a local solar distributor, and it plugs directly into the meter there. And so they're generating clean energy into the meter via the same types of electronics as the solar industry, but using a generating tech that has both a resource that is more reliable and controllable and continuous, and they're doing it in a way that can deliver power right there to the dairy farms as well. And so here at Emrgy, we see water infrastructure like this. You don't have to go to New Zealand to find a canal, especially if you're in California, you can see them all over. We can use that same infrastructure without having to buy more land or take up farms and turn that into a source of renewable energy that is, we believe, has the ability to be very low cost energy. Hydro is known to be a very low cost electricity source because of that continuous nature of it, and to be generating right there where we need it for resiliency. We're not going to be transporting this power a long distance.
Yeah, I kind of want to highlight what you were talking about there about the continuous energy. If people remember or go to our YouTube channel, you can see Helios Altus talk about, you have the capacity factors of solar versus capacity factors of hydro, and hydro has a much higher capacity factor. And one thing that does reduce is if you're in a rural area, your reliance on maybe needing additional storage, which is batteries, which is additional cost. And the fun thing that he mentioned that didn't occur to me is that, I'm in California where I'm used to sun being everywhere. There are large parts of the world that they actually get rain. So solar is not as appealing when you have more clouds or like half your day's rainy. So hydro becomes a lot more appealing and less impactful on the land. Now, recently, I wanted to kind of jump into, you've been kind of on a fundraising journey for Emrgy that's been, I would call it successful from the outside. I don't know how you feel about it from the inside, but in this kind of I guess an economic somewhat slowdown, you're finding some success in fundraising to be able to do these projects. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that journey and what you think, how you were able to convince some people that, hey, yes, it's just a hydro dam, but it's more than that, it's an opportunity. So
Yeah, absolutely. So for those that maybe have seen my bio or haven't, I'm a first-time entrepreneur. This is my first venture. I'm not a serial entrepreneur that goes out and is an expert at raising capital, whether that's venture capital, private equity, or whatever it is. I actually came from the defense contracting world. And so I'm very familiar with government-sponsored research. And so, coming into Emrgy, I had had a previous role in applying for and managing federally funded research programs. And actually, Emrgy's technology was first funded there. And that's where I became very personally inspired by what a technology could do that looked and felt like solar in so many ways. There's a module that you aggregate with arrays, you plug it all together into the grid. It felt like solar from an architecture perspective, a product architecture perspective, but it used the power of water, which just is to me something that can, as you said, it can be its own energy storage in many ways, and it can be something really reliable and resilient. And so when I started, I was applying for government grants. That was something that I knew well, I knew how to do, I thought could fund this. And what actually brought me to Emrgy full time was that we were awarded 1.2 million from the US DOE under Emrgy now. And that was what allowed me to first, come work full time, to start hiring people, to start looking at this. But what I quickly learned is that while federal funding is an incredible catalyst for growing high tech businesses, it's not the whole picture. The federal grants would fund us to do prototype testing and to refine the product, but it would not pay for my trip to go try to pitch this to the city of Denver or to SMUD, someone like that. And so I quickly learned that we had a funding gap. And every prototype we built cost us between $30,000 and $50,000. When I started the business, I was in my mid-20s with, no ability to bootstrap or self-fund a business as capital intensive as this. And so very early on, I recognized that we needed outside capital to be able to grow the business. And the federal funding has been a huge help in that, being able to go out to angel investors and things like that and say, hey, look, we're seeking $1 million, but it's going to match this 1.2 million government grant that we have, and we're not going to spend your money on technology and testing to failure and things like that. We're going to use your capital to go and try to find beta customers and pilot opportunities. That resonated, and so we were successful in bringing in some angel capital in the beginning with that first federal grant. And that allowed us to go out and start developing early relationships with customers who would use this. It allowed us to go and start building a bigger team. And in 2017, our first big customer landed. So the city of Denver purchased beta equipment from us to install into the channel and test out one of their channels. And so this was a super big milestone for us. And we were then able to go back out and say, hey, look, we've landed now a big early customer, and we need more capital to be able to fully outfit their canal, be able to do the testing, be able to showcase what we can do. And we leveraged that into a seed equity round. And in 2018, we brought in a little over 4 million to do that. And so that allowed the company then to take the next step into the market, start developing new customer relationships, and we were able to get projects done in Metro Salt Lake City and in Wyoming, and start to dot our way across the map and build out this fleet. And then we were going to go out and raise more capital in late 2020, but with the pandemic and with everything else, we thought to ourselves, man, I'm not sure this is the right time to do this. And also, with the presidential election and a horizon that we believed was going to be investing more heavily into clean energy, we decided just to raise a little bit of interim capital, not a big raise, just something to essentially get buy us some time. So we did that. And I'm really, really glad that we did. It would be, it's when you look at now where the both political and other tailwind, private and political tailwinds are for clean energy and for climate technologies. It's bigger than ever. Now is definitely the best time in all of history to have a climate tech company and have a plan and a vision towards success. And so with the Inflation Reduction Act now effectively providing a 30 to 50% tax credit that can be monetized back into our projects, with the ability to use low interest federally guaranteed project loans in the projects, things like that that will help stimulate getting this equipment out in the field. Investors want to be part of that. There is a lot, just like back in my very first round when I could go to investors and say, hey, look, I've got this government grant that will match your investment. Now I can say, look, invest into Emrgy, and the projects that we're going to be able to get out there are going to have these tailwinds. They're going to be stimulated. They're going to be the market is so much bigger, because even though we haven't been able to get to full economies of scale yet, we're still a pretty small fleet. These incentives help us overcome those initial barriers, so that it's almost like we have thousands of turbines in the field in terms of cost. That will get us there, fill that gap, so that then we can build out these projects everywhere in the world, just like here in New Zealand, without needing any incentives at all. This project here in New Zealand, it didn't get $1 of government incentives, but it works. It's profitable. Actually, for the farmers, it was profitable the first day they plugged it in, because they got a very nice financing from their district. And so we just closed 18 million in our Series A. If you look at the data of investments across climate tech, the amount of investment going into power generation is actually getting smaller and smaller. A lot of the investments right now are going into things like renewable fuels, hydrogen, or renewable natural gas. There's also quite a bit of investment going into energy efficiency and demand response. The amount of money going into power generation is actually dwindling, which did concern us a bit going into this raise. And I'm really grateful that there were the investors that there are saying, yeah, we're not done with, we don't just solve the world's problems with solar and wind. There are other power generation needs that we have. There is a need to not be so reliant on energy storage, as you pointed out before, with the alignment around Helios Altus and their strategy too. And we've been, every dollar was hard. Don't get me wrong, like it always is, every single one. But it's been really inspiring to see the number of investors that have said, yeah, we do need more ways to make sure that the power that we're using is generated cleanly, reliably, and in a way that can really scale.
There was a lot that you gave there, and I want to try to give some people some time to absorb that. But I want to start off with highlighting what you said of it, this being a great time to be in climate tech and clean tech. So if you have a company out there and you want support with it, reach out to us at Clean Start. And also, if you're a female founder out there, I know there's Fourth Wave, they connected us with you, and we're grateful for them to do that. And if you go to our YouTube channel, you can actually see us talk with Fourth Wave, Cheryl Beninga, on it there. And also on our YouTube, you can find Gary Simon breaking down all the money that's going into climate investment from the IRA and the Infrastructure Act. And also we talk with Open Grants Sadell Tursky about how you can go after grants and partner with people so that you can make it successful. Because I really liked how you went in there and you said, hey, we'll spend because the government, they always want you to spend it specifically on developing the technology. They're like, don't go and talk and sell it to anyone. But then you can go, I loved how you just took that and you said, like, yeah, but I can tell the investor, I'm just working on selling this to get a return for you. I think some people, if you heard that, I think if you heard that, you should you should duplicate it, because that's a great piece of advice. Also, you're saying, energy is not generation is not seeing as much investment. I'd like to think that, the energy response investments and the efficiency ones hopefully would enable smaller scale generation and make that, more appealing in the future. I think I just saw a report today saying Google is completely skipping the traditional energy model and going more into community and microgrids for their generation, because just the time it takes to get a large project on the grid is really kind of out there. So now with your investment, you're still in that small stage, ready to scale up and I guess go big. Or what is going big for you? That's a good question. What would be going big for you guys?
That is a great question. We, like the Google report you read, I haven't seen that one, but like that report, we believe that the future of energy is distributed. Not only do we just have so much work to do to meet 2030, 2050 climate goals, we have to get projects online now. And building that big project, it is a much longer time frame. And my goodness, if you look at the estimates that are needed of what it's going to take to bolster our transmission grid and our transmission grid for these large projects over the next 20 years, it's staggering. And so we believe the future of energy is distributed. We believe that it is at the community scale. And if that is the case, we are going to have baseload power and the ability to dispatch power. And what I mean by that is it can't just be take it when the sun's off, you don't get it when the sun's not on. We have to be able to control that. And that's one of the big things that Emrgy is working on, is how we can work with water districts to take what is currently just a flowing resource and use it for dispatchability in community level power. But for us, going big is a similar model to solar, or I should say community solar, in that our individual machines are not expected to get bigger. We do have one platform that is taller than the one you see on the screen, that goes up to about 20 feet deep, think like California aqueduct type depths. But beyond that, you shouldn't expect from us, mega generators, huge turbines or things like that. We believe that the modularity and keeping the actual module very small, very manufacturable, very standardized is essentially what solar has already proven can dominate the global renewable energy markets. I mean, no one talks about, people often look at me and they're like, 25 kilowatts, can't you do bigger? And I say, look, that 500 watt panel over there is changing the world because they're doing so many thousands of them. And that's what we believe at Emrgy, is that it's more about quantity than about physical size or individual capacity. And so our projects will likely be between 0.5 megawatt and 10 megawatts each, just like community solar. And they will be ultimately as many of those as we possibly can fit in. And I can share a slide that sort of looks at what going big means for Emrgy. And essentially, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that there is over 2 million linear miles of global surface water infrastructure that's used mostly for agricultural purposes. The USA is around 14,000 miles of that. And we validated this with bottom-up calculations as well. In fact, we have a whole army of people that all they do is actually sit and map out on GIS exactly where all this water infrastructure is, because unfortunately, there is no equivalent of like a PV Syst or a software that shows us where the canals are, how much energy is in them, and how much of a financeable project it is. We're actually having to build that out ourselves out of necessity. But we've mapped out around 20,000 miles of canals, just over about 6 states out of the 50. So this tracks fairly well with what we're building out. And we're out developing partnerships with water districts, and currently have partnerships on around 5,000 miles of that already as well. When you look out to the world here, when you think about some of the more ancient civilizations, ones that have been moving water for a long time, is where you see quite a lot of this surface water transport. And these are the types of infrastructure within which Emrgy operates. And so our goal is to outfit as many of these canals as we possibly can with our hydrotech, but also recognizing that that there is no one silver bullet to climate change and combating that. And so we fully expect that more projects than not will be hybridized together, potentially with solar or with hydrogen or with EV charging or with energy storage, because ultimately what it all boils down to is having that reliable generator that can be the backbone of so many of these iterations of either power generation or renewable power usage for electrified activities.
Okay. I've been and seen the canals they have in China, and some of the I was in one Eastern city, and they had this, I think it was something like a 700-year-old design map of canals, or it might have been older than that, but it was this big clay tablet, and it's like not all the canals got finished, but they highlighted the ones that did. So it's, yeah, they have the same planning problems we do here today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, is water historically has not always been naturally present in the areas where it's needed most. And being able to engineer that water is about as ancient of an engineering task as there gets, right?
Yeah.
And then understanding what the power is in that water based on the gravity and the topography that it's running within is something that, like, we're not reinventing that physics at all. Really, all we're doing is developing a product style that can thrive within that, and being able to do it without some of the things that elongate timelines, like building a dam, or that escalate budgets, like the same thing. And so, yeah.
I wanted to call on Gary here. He's co-founder of Clean Start, and always has good insight and questions, to see if there's anything that has sparked his interest from watching this.
Oh, well, it's a great story, Emily, and congratulations on your most recent fundraise. What kind of price for the power that you generate are you going to need in order to have a viable product? I know that changes by installation, but do you have a target in mind that is sort of the sweet spot for what you're trying to look for?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in fact, one that we've debated a lot as a team here at Emrgy. When we put together our corporate goals for the year, for any company like Emrgy, it's sort of hard to have a corporate goal that doesn't have LCOE as part of it. The name of the game in energy and clean energy is, what is the levelized cost of this energy over its life? And what we decided as a team is that for this year, at least, our goals are more around generating economic value than potentially hitting the floor on LCOE. And right. What I mean by that is, we have projects where we are installing behind the meter let's say in California with water districts who are on PG&E retail rates and have seen their rates increase 9% year over year on average in the last 3 years, and delivering value to that. We can deliver incredible value to them with a long-term fixed price without having to be at 2 cent or 3 cent LCOE. And for us this year, our focus is really around where can we generate and maximize that value for customers. However, on the longer term basis, as we start taking our fleet from 30 turbines to 3,000 to 30,000, that's where obviously our goal is just to drive costs to a point where the levelized cost of electricity can be highly competitive in markets all around the world. And for that, getting into the, 3 to 5 cent LCOE range is absolutely within reason. We're doing that today. We have projects today that are generating in that range. And we would see that, basically being a function of really two things. And that's why in the water world, it's slightly more nuanced, let's say, than solar, because in our world, two things change. One is the amount of power that each of these turbines can generate. So in this photo, we have 7.5 kilowatt generators on top. But if that water was just, maybe 1 foot per second faster, it would probably be a 10 kilowatt generator or a 12. And it's the same platform, just different based on how much water is actually going through the turbine. And the second is how many days a year is the water flowing. And, that's one area that is vastly different than solar. You can pull a solar model and know exactly how many days of sunshine a particular parcel of land gets. That isn't really going to change very much over the next 30 years. In our case, this is both a potentially riskier feedstock because this is controlled by a human. The humans control how many cubic feet of water come in from the river every day, but it's also an incredible opportunity to align incentives with that human that's controlling the feedstock and to operate the water flow in a way that generates the lowest cost of power and ultimately the most valuable power if you're generating it at the times when energy is most needed. And so while like in terms of just putting a turbine out there and saying, hey, we're going to assume that it's our medium-sized turbine and it runs 50% of the time, really where we're focused is how we can partner with districts that are really aligned with driving that both levelized cost down as low as possible and the profitability of the systems up by delivering it and dispatching it when it can be the most economically viable.
Well, one of the advantages of your strategy of going with the irrigation districts, particularly in California, is that there are so many of them. And indeed, they do have big power bills coming in, and anything they can do to reduce those power bills, as I gather how you're trying to deliver value to them. Plus, a lot of them own their own distribution wires. So they don't necessarily have to deal with some of the connection issues that plague others.
And they typically don't have great budgets either. So that's power costs, very sensitive.
So how deeply are you looking in California for locations? Is this a prime target for you, or is it just a handy target?
It is a prime target for us. We have a team that is based in California. That are working with California water districts every single day. We see California as an exciting market. Really, I guess I should expand the two things that drive LCOE. And then there's the third thing, which is the sales price of the electricity. And for all projects, every project, we're basically trying to find the optimal balance of those three things. One, how powerful is the water? Two, how energetic is the water? How much does that power run over time? And then three is what is the economic value of every electron that comes out? And so in California, a lot of times we see good power in California. You've got big canals, you've got a lot of flow throughput. The seasons in California vary quite a bit. We have some districts that are running water for 11 months out of the year. We have other districts that might be lucky to have 5 months out of the year. And so that's the area that we see the biggest variability in California to find good projects. But then on that electricity sales price, California, of course, especially districts that are on retail power, which you'd be shocked as to how many of them there actually are that are not getting any cost relief on their power, is we can provide really high value power to them because they can get a fairly big savings on a per kilowatt hour basis.
So do you end up owning the equipment and just selling them the power, or are they buying the equipment?
So up until our Series A, just recently, we didn't have any real ability to own and finance our own systems. We were transactionally selling that equipment to water districts, and the systems have a great return on investment. And the water districts typically see that. I mean, you don't know how often I meet with someone and they say, I've been watching this water run for years, and I know there's energy in that water that we should be taking advantage of. But their budgets, as Thomas correctly pointed out, their budgets are small, and often a 2-turbine or 5-turbine purchase is a pretty big one for them. And so we recognized very clearly that for us to be able to go big, we have to be able to own and operate our own projects and share that revenue, or just sell the power at a discounted rate to the water districts. And so now with the Series A, I'm proud to say we can offer that. And we've already done our first project on our own balance sheet that way. And now we're scaling that pretty massively with partners that are looking at Emrgy as an alternative or complement to solar, the same types of investors that see, long-term power purchase agreements, the types of revenue inflow back, and the ability to take advantage of some of those time of use power generating times that can be really profitable when it comes to a power generating project. And so we're excited about that. And that is really the main going in marketing strategy that we have today. We never ask districts to buy anything from us anymore at all. We ask them to partner with us, host a project, and get paid for doing that.
Yeah, well, that's very smart for the kind of thing that you're trying to do. And it's a problem faced by many people building clean tech businesses. It's the difference between recurring revenue and one-time revenue. One-time revenue is sell the equipment, but then every year you start over at zero. Recurring revenue is that you make installations as you've described, and you're pretty sure as to what the revenue stream will be coming out of those. That's a much more powerful position, no pun intended.
I do want to give.
And ever since I started Emrgy, every angel investor to now has said, can't we have recurring revenue? We need recurring revenue. And believe me, I know it, but I'm always jealous of my, entrepreneur counterparts in the software as a service world, where they can offer a recurring revenue product without having to be highly capital intensive. For me to be able to offer the recurring revenue means I have to be able to incur the cost of a 2 to 10 megawatt system, and it's not coming from Emrgy, it's coming from financiers, but they had to develop trust with us. They had to watch the systems generate in the field. They had to understand the maintenance cycles. We've had to go through quite a long period of essentially proving it out before being able to really offer this. And so we do believe we're there now. We're already seeing that, but we're just now sort of tiptoeing our way in. And so over the next 2 years is when we'll really start to stretch our legs on that.
So all right, we've got some questions from the chat that I want to get to, Gary. One from Elias is a question about using natural reservoirs in small villages, or is it something just for man-made canals? He works with rural and small town communities and independents and community solar and mini pumped hydro storage. So I don't know if you want to expand on your question, Elias, or let her answer it as it is.
Yeah, that is all.
Okay.
If you need clarification.
Sure. So the decision to work in man-made canals is a decision driven by the regulatory environment rather than the engineering specifications of the equipment. The system can work in a river. In fact, as you see on the screen, this canal looks a lot like a river or a creek. It is earthen on both sides, and it has a lot of attributes, same kind of environmental flora and fauna that you might see coming through the channel. The reason we focus on man-made canals is because they're exempt from Federal Energy Regulatory Commission licensing here in the US, up to 40 megawatts per project. And that allows us to get projects done quickly without a lot of environmental regulation and concern. In other countries, perhaps there may be lower regulation for rivers or streams. And in that, we can certainly take a look at that, but we have to make sure that the systems are protected from, of course, environmental hazards, and that people and the environment are protected from hazards related to the system. I mean, this is a power generating system and has to be adequately secure.
We have Evan Litwin who wants to throw a difficult question at you. So thank you for that. Evan?
Yes, hello. Thank you very much. It's actually a few questions because I'm from Quebec, Canada.
Mhm.
We derive all of our electricity through hydro, 100%. In fact, we ship it down to Massachusetts, New York State, and
Mhm.
Vermont, as well as exporting to Ontario, which does use some nuclear. Quick question. Number one, what's the fish kill ratio? Number two, what's the efficiency versus a mini turbine, which standardly does about 250 kilowatts? And the picture you're showing here seems a little bit small for a mini turbine. So, you know, I'm not quite sure. The third one is, who handles the infrastructure? And the reason why I'm asking that question, and this is important, we just had an ice storm here, and we had 1 million people without power for, I'd say, approximately 8 days, okay, out of 8
Wow.
million. And we've had problems with that for a long time. You know, the government's been bothered. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Great. Happy to address those. In terms of the, I think you said Fitzco. I don't.
Fish kill, I think.
Oh,
Fish
fish
kill.
kill.
Fish
Fish
kill.
kill.
Yes.
So in terms of the fish kill ratio, we don't have a specific, we have not run specific tests on that. The thing about being in water infrastructure is that water infrastructure is it's a brownfield environment whereby sometimes there are fish in the canals, especially for even sacrificial purposes to eat algae and things like that off of the canals. But it's not an actual requirement, environmental requirement to have that being in this space. I will say we see fish all the time. They're always alive, and the system itself, let's see if I have a picture of it, but it's, we have, let's see, maybe this shows it better because some of these turbines are out of the water. It's a vertical axis turbine that is only about 10% solid around the circumference. And so the likelihood of it being damaging, especially to the size of fish that are in these types of channels, is very, very, very low. We may run analyses on this or actually have a ratio determined through testing in the future. But as of right now, it's not a requirement of the market that we're in. The second question that you had is around size. So in comparison to a mini turbine. So these are the turbine you see here is also coincidentally a 7.5 kilowatt turbine. The one you saw in the first slide, that twin system there is 15 kilowatts. So 15 kilowatts compared with the 250 kilowatt that you talked about for the mini turbine. So fairly different scale, this being modular rather than, you know, a centralized system. So and I want to make sure that point is clear. Emrgy pursues 250 kilowatt projects and above all the time. We would never do that project in a single 250 kilowatt turbine. We believe that that centralized generation in and of itself, even if it's mini centralized, is not as conducive to a highly scalable future as a distributed system where, like you see here, you can see these modules one after the next, all the way down the canal, feeding that into a voltage bus line and ultimately aggregating that power to the distribution grid. And so in terms of efficiency, these are definitely going to be lower efficiency in terms of a water to wire system than any centralized system that would be penstock based. Anytime you're manipulating the water flow to be funneled through a penstock right over the blades, you're going to be able to get a higher efficiency than a system that is retrofitted into a canal like what you see here. And that's okay. That's a deliberate design decision from us. We believe one of the things holding hydro back from being able to scale in the 21st century is the fact that hydro as a generation source has always been bespoke. It's always been about efficiency and performance rather than about practicality and applicability. In fact, someone from, I won't say who, but one of the largest utilities in the US a few weeks ago said that they describe hydro as artisanal energy because so often, you know, you think about solar and wind as just let's get manufactured, standardized equipment out there. And if, you know, this turbine back here is a few percent lower efficiency than this turbine up here, that's okay because we got it out there quickly and it's very low cost. That is the strategy of Emrgy, much more so than individual turbine efficiency. But it's a totally different way of thinking. A lot of times it's hard to reconcile that in a world, especially let's say in Canada, where there's so much hydro, and it is amazing. It is incredibly amazing what Canada has been able to do with hydro. That it is a totally different method of thinking of like, why should we have this less efficient machine? But it's really because when you compare this to what is growing right now, and you compare this to solar, you've got, 3 times the power density in water. You have the ability to generate 24 hours a day. You have the scalability and modularity and flexibility that this is really focused on trying to bring those elements into water, even if it's not, 90% efficient like a typical hydro. The last thing I'll mention really about infrastructure is that typically our projects, our responsibility ends at the point of interconnect, which is a distribution feeder, whether that's at a meter or a new service drop. And we maintain the system to that point. Typically it's undergrounded. You can see here, there's some overhead line over to the side of the canal. Typically then it's undergrounded from there. And once it's at the point of interconnect, then it's the utilities. We do see quite a bit of ice. This project is in the Central Valley of California, actually not far from probably where many of you are sitting right now. But we do have projects in Denver, Salt Lake City, Wyoming that all see lots of ice. Ice is a very real concern, and understanding how our systems deal with ice is a huge topic of conversation all the time among our engineering team. I just spent a week in Idaho where every single meeting we talked about ice, and we have pictures and videos of how it has sustained in the past. But no question, this is a electromechanical machine. So, debris, ice, etc. It is absolutely a concern and something we have to work with. On the utility side, typically our liability is then, handed over to the utility as soon as we interconnect. So we don't typically have a hand in that reliability, but over time, as we start to look at community scale systems, further decentralizing, I, as an entrepreneur, I actually didn't tell this part of my origin story, but I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So I'm always full of ideas and visions. Right now, Emrgy is innovating the generation side, but one day perhaps we'll innovate some of the delivery side as well. Certainly, it's something that we are driven by. Is that in the same way that we've been able to advance from landlines and things like that, we do believe that the way we deliver power will evolve from the current way that we've always been doing it. But it's, I would say that's quite a bit down the road for us. We're really focused on the generation piece today.
I was just about to ask you to wrap it up. What you are looking most forward to on it? And that seemed like honestly the answer to the question I was about to ask. But is there anything else that you're really optimistic about?
Yeah, I'm really optimistic about innovation and where that's going, as I mentioned before, particularly around hybridizing these systems to create a holistic system, whether it's delivering out the other side an electron or a kilogram of hydrogen or an EV charger or something like that. I'm also really excited about the incentives and just the political embrace of clean energy. No matter what side of the table you sit on politically, being able to see that the growth in renewable energy and carbon abatement is something that is good for all of us is something that I've certainly been waiting for and excited to see that starting to move. The other place that I'm bullish about is Emrgy's role within the water sector overall. 90% of all climate crises are water crises. They manifest in water, either where it's not supposed to be or water being where it's not supposed to be or water not being where it is supposed to be. And while that's not our business, we're staying the course right now, being able to have thought leadership, and we do a lot of data. I told you we're mapping canals and all that. Really being able to be a voice in the broader climate discussion is something that I'm excited about, and ultimately just getting way more of these machines out there. I remember following the truck to our very first delivery with the turbines on the flatbed, just being like, yeah, here we go. And I'm excited to get real hardware in the ground generating clean kilowatt hours every single day.
Mapping the energy of canals is that sounded really interesting, but I'm like, that's a whole nother discussion.
A whole nother podcast. We'll come back to it one day.
So if people want to connect with Emrgy, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can definitely find me in many different ways. Here is.
I'm sharing my screen now. We can put it into the chat for people to follow up.
Sorry.
But
No worries.
Emrgy.com or.
You can go to our website at emrgy.com, EMRGY.com. You can find me at just emily@emrgy.com, and would love to hear from you and would love to talk more if this is a topic that moves you.
Well, it definitely moved me. I want to thank Emily Morris, founder of Emrgy, today for joining us. Thank you very much. Everyone give her a round of applause if you can out there. And thank you those of you who attended virtually on LinkedIn and on YouTube and Facebook. Thank you for attending. You can connect with us through, not so really active on Twitter anymore, but you can find us on LinkedIn and Instagram and YouTube. So thank you for attending. Thank you everyone here. We'll have an edited version down in a couple of days, and let's be part of the energy transition and build a big energy hub here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.